it's time for us to have our first conversation about Brendan Sorsby, which we have not got to discuss on this podcast because it's all happened while we have been on hiatus. And so now here we sit, and I'll just do a brief recap of events. Brendan Sorsby enters the portal, transfers from Cincinnati to Texas Tech. And I've seen numbers floating around, and I don't know if the numbers are official, if they're all rumors, but 4 to 5 million is what I've seen is like the pretty consistent like payout in NIL wise.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, no idea if that's the official number, if that's just a bunch of people who are spreading rumors, but we're gonna just trust.
He's making at least a couple mil.
He is making a lot of money, or was gonna make a lot of money. I don't know
I
if
think they said they're paying him.
okay. So he was and is making a lot of money to play college football there, and then like a month ago, right? It's been since we stopped going. So in the last month and a half, probably about a month ago, it comes out that he has been sports betting um, on Indiana games that he played in. He also bet on live, like he would go to Major League Baseball games and then bet live pitches, like ball strike counts. Um, and I think I saw the total was over $60,000 total.
I think around 90,000.
Yeah, I knew it was a six or a nine.
bet.
So $90,000 in bets. He gets caught for that and gets, the NCAA is like obviously like he's suspended, like he can't, so he appeals it. And through the process of appeals, he gets the okay to play, and a judge in the state of Texas, not an alumni of Texas Tech, went to Houston Law School. But he gives him the appeal he needs to play and be eligible. And Texas Tech, the administration releases a 22-minute video, which I did watch because I felt like I should watch it. I did not want to just assume that it was a bunch of crap, which it was. But I went back and watched the entire thing, and it was just jargon. And so they released that video to try and defend them, to try and defend him, defend their actions, his actions. And then, like a week and a half ago, he announced he was going to forego his eligibility and enter the supplemental draft of the NFL. He declares that, and then like 2 days ago, the NFL announced that they would not let him, and they were not going to have a supplemental draft. And so now here we sit. I don't think we have closure. But after that recap, what are y'all's thoughts on Brendan Sorsby?
I mean, I think we reached the right point. I don't really know about the supplemental draft aspect of it because I don't really know how all that works. Now, I did read the statement the NFL put out, and like it kind of makes sense to me that their decision not to hold one, just because it kind of feels like he came across as entitled for them to have one. Just like, all right, I'm here, put me in one, and didn't really provide apparently like the necessary evidence they needed to conduct one. And then also their whole spiel about the integrity of the game, which like I don't necessarily disagree with, but it's also pretty rich coming from the NFL, which isn't what JP calls it the National Felons League. Like it's not necessarily the most is integrous a word?
I don't know. Just roll with it.
League of integrity.
Yeah.
They're not known for being a league of integrity. But like I still necessarily disagree with that. In terms of like him not playing at Texas Tech, I think it's pretty cut and dry for me. Like, and everyone besides Texas Tech people, in terms of like, you bet on the sport you played in, you shouldn't be able to play. Like, I think it's that simple. And it's not even thinking like, clearly he was not a healthy gambler. Like he
Right.
had issues. But like if he hadn't bet on college football, like that's one thing. And I think there's like avenues for him to still play there, obviously. Like it's pretty degenerate to be at an MLB game and betting on balls and strikes. But like we can like I don't want to say we can work with that, but like he didn't do anything to directly affect the game of college football. But as soon as he betted on the games that involved the team he was on, like instant no for me. That's it. You're done.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at.
JP?
Yeah, boxing has a thing that it's kind of a commonplace for fighters to bet on themselves before a big fight, like put a large sum of money on themselves, um, and they can legally do that. And so I have seen people make the argument of, oh well, if he was betting for Indiana to win when he was at Indiana, what's the problem there? Um, but I just disagree. There's pretty fine line when it comes to those things. Um, I think um, I'm I'm glad that we came to this spot where he is, ruled ineligible playing college football. Because quite frankly, as many have made the point, most notably like Josh Pate made the point of it was going to be a ugly, ugly season if he were to have suited up for the Red Raiders. Shout out CT. Every single game that they, especially every road game that they played in, it would be bad. I mean, you think about any of the, just think about the coaches or players or whatnot that have dealt with like legal situations. Like, think about like Chris Beard when he came to the hump. Like, think about how our students reacted at Mississippi State to Chris Beard being there. Now put it on a 22-year-old kid who's playing quarterback for the Red Raiders, and it's just only going to be worse. We it and it's only going to hurt worse on him mentally. And as you
Yeah,
pointed out, Jack, it's already a kid who is struggling mentally. To have a gambling addiction at his age is, a serious problem. I get it where he's coming from. I understand. Not that I'm not going to come out here and say I'm a gambling addict, but I really enjoy gambling. But I if I were 6'3" and on pace to maybe be a first round draft pick or just a quarterback for any team in college football, I'm not doing that.
yeah,
I know that's a line you don't cross. Uh, so I'm glad that he's going to be punished for that. Um, I hated the way Texas Tech handled that. I think it's going to put another sour taste in a lot of people's mouths of the way that they've you know been a part of the story of college football in the 2020s so far, with the amount of, and just even in college sports in general. Like, think about a lot of their other sports, how they've built these like their softball program is through the roof right now because of the money that they're spending in NIL. Just with the nature of the sport. Now you add this on top of it. I don't think it
sure.
helps in that whatsoever. I do want to be clear. Like, I don't think I don't think Sanders mentioned this, but it wasn't Sorsby that chose he wasn't going to play college football and go in the supplemental draft. It was Texas Tech. Texas Tech decided amongst themselves that they weren't going to allow him to play for them this year and heavily encouraged him to go into the
Yes,
supplemental draft.
and apparently it was
And of
something
course, go ahead.
because like the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, said something that like apparently he goofed because whatever he said meant that uh the NCAA had a way then to speed up the appeal process because apparently the trial was set for February, and then of course once it was like okay now they can get the trial moved earlier most likely. Texas Tech was like, well, yeah, clearly we're not winning this, so now we're just going to cut ties. But that's a good point. And I do want to circle back to something the guy said because you mentioned like clearly he's a guy that's struggling, and I was saying like if you didn't bet on college football, like we can help him out. I meant like in terms like with him still playing college football, like we can still help the guy out
Yeah.
no matter what he did.
Yeah.
Because you are right, he clearly is someone that could use some help and is probably in a bit of a tough spot right now mentally. And yet, once again, there's no reason we can help him out. But yet, once again, there just has to be consequences for actions, and he's
Yeah.
just found out what the consequences of his actions are, and that sucks. But as the NFL said in their letter, we wish you the best of luck in preparing for the 2027 NFL draft. And hopefully you can enter that. So I guess that's where he's at now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What
it's
a
gonna be an
wild
interesting
ride, though.
conversation for the next year about that. We haven't really seen like a, I don't know, first round pick level talent, but certainly even a top 10 pick level talent, at least how scouts are viewing him right now, since Jamar Chase to sit out a season, like a full season of college football, and then go into the draft. But Jamar, that was COVID. That was the reasoning for that. This is a completely different reason. So I'm curious to see how NFL scouts and teams will react to him missing a year of development on top of the fact that he's got this on his plate now.
Yeah.
We've seen many quarterbacks deal with, and just players in general deal with the fact that their off-field issues hurt them and their draft stock going forward. Most recently, allegedly, Shador Sanders and his character and his image hurt him in that way. Um, but even going back to guys like Johnny Manziel or something, this has hurt draft stocks a ton in the past. I do think, man, part of me like wishes from a football perspective that the NFL did allow him to go into the supplemental draft, just because like it would be such a fascinating conversation
Sure.
for so many teams of how would you go about this? Would you, because the in theory the amount of value you could get for just spending a high end second round pick um, to be able to get Sorsby, and then on top of that you get him in your building for an entire year, and he can develop for that entire year. Think about teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers that could have used a guy like Brendan Sorsby to give him a year to develop before Aaron Rodgers, we at least assume, leaves after this season.
Surely, right?
And part of me, yeah, I mean, who knows? I hope he keeps playing. But part of me is like you said, Jack, earlier. I mean, it's kind of the pot calling the kettle black in the NFL in terms of how they choose to go about, protecting the game and whatnot. Hopefully, you can't hear that train in the background.
We did. It's all good.
Okay,
Fun sound effects.
with how many players? I mean, every single team. If you're a fan of an NFL team, you are cheering for a player with a criminal record. It's just known fact, unfortunately. Um, Pretty much every single team has a player with a criminal record, and not that I'm not here to I'm not here to give my Pusilowski pyramid on what crimes are good or not, but I do think
Man, that'd be fire though.
the
A tier ranking of
Yeah,
crimes.
the kinds of crimes that end up, resulting in a felony or, in my eyes at least, higher on the pyramid than gambling is, even if it is gambling on, the
Sure.
sport that you're playing in. Um, so part of me doesn't like that part of it, but uh, man, it's just going to be an interesting year of conversation for Sorsby. I can't wait to hear, Field Yates and Mel Kiper yap about him for an entire year while having no tape to go off of besides this past year at Cincinnati. Part of it, like I thought it was going to be a really intriguing year with Texas Tech, because what kind of let them down last year was Baron Morton and his play at the end of the year.
Yep.
Um, and Sorsby was a guy at Cincinnati that we covered a couple Cincinnati games throughout the year, a couple notable ones as well. We talked about it a ton. Sorsby was a guy who had I think it was 9 or 10 rushing touchdowns. So it's a guy who could move at his size, but his his best games, when he played well, his team won. When he played bad, his team lost. When he threw interceptions, when he turned the ball over, his team lost. He was very much the engine of that Bearcat team last year, and I would have been very curious to see had he suited up for Texas Tech. Would that be the case this year? Um, but man, it's going to be just an interesting year conversation. I don't think the bad stuff is going to go away in terms of how fans are going to react at Texas Tech this year, even though it was them that have finally ruled that Sorsby couldn't play for him. So I'm curious to see how that'll go, across for everyone.
Sure.
But man, what a bizarre situation.
Yeah, I cannot wait for our mock drafts next year, because I'm sure you'll see Sorsby range from like as high as like top 10, like you said, to undrafted. I mean, there will be people who will go into that saying that I'm not going to put him on my mock draft because I don't think an NFL team's going to draft him, which I wouldn't be. It wouldn't surprise me. That they said, you know what, gambling is a no go for us. I mean, we'll allow a lot of other things, but gambling is kind of the line we won't cross. But it will be really, really interesting to see. Tucker just said he doesn't think the NFL cracks down on gambling because of the morality. It's that they can't let there be any notion of the games being fixed,
So
which
actually, go ahead.
is fair.
It's a good point because the NFL is very much in bed with the gambling companies,
Mhm.
and if people start thinking, "Hey, games are fixed,"
Any
They-
more than they already do.
any more than they already do. I mean, right now it's mainly jokes in terms of like games are fixed.
Yeah, probably.
For most people.
For most people.
Well, no one's gonna bet on something that they think is fixed, and so
Yeah.
then there's a loss of money, and then the NFL loses money and loses a big time, partnership. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a really good point.
People would stop watching, and like you said, they'd stop spending money on tickets, jerseys, parking. So it would be a huge loss for the NFL for that to happen. And so they that's why they have like a no.
Yeah.
That's why they have such a hard line on gambling, which is why I would not be surprised if Sorsby just doesn't find a spot there, a landing spot there, because they aren't going to take a risk. They're not going to risk potentially their entire billion-dollar organization
Yeah, I hope he gets a shot.
on one guy. And then he also pointed out that with a whole year to prepare, he better have a heck of a combine. We'll see.
I mean, he can just practice the combine every day.
True, he
Basically.
can. He can just go out and run the 40-yard dash. But yeah, that'll be something that we keep our eye on very intently